Welcome back to Plane Time, a broadcast from the Florida Aviation Network, and we're broadcasting today live and in the clear from our studio in Orlando, Florida. I'm Ron Timmermans, a pilot, an instructor, and one of the many hosts for the Florida Aviation Network. I'm substituting today for my colleague, Mr. Ben Coleman, who's on assignment at another location. I'm delighted to have you back. We've had two segments this morning with one of our guests, Diego Alfonso Sr., to talk about Theories of Flight 2.0 and his book that he recently published. And now in this last segment this morning, we have with us Dr. Grorge Bartuska. And we're going to have an interesting discussion about thunderstorms and specifically about lightning. Let me tell you about Dr. Bartuska. Dr. Grorge Bartuska is an engineer and an educator, although now retired. He has a doctorate and he studied specifically tropical meteorology. So he is ideally suited for this topic. Grorge is also a veteran of the U.S. Navy, and thank you, Grorge, for your service to our country. I'm delighted to have you here today. Welcome back again to Plane Time, Grorge. It's good to have you here. So, Grorge, last night I was watching TV and a storm blew through my neighborhood in Orlando. We had quite the lightning show. It continued on to the east, and as I looked out my windows to the east, I was absolutely amazed at the lightning show that I saw. I felt safe because I was in my house, but sometimes I'm outside and I see a thunderstorm roll through, and sometimes I see lightning. I'm wondering, Grorge, do we really give lightning its due safety that we should, or are we out there and probably shouldn't be? What's your thought?
In my opinion, we don't. I grew up in South Bend, Indiana, where we have frontal weather, and lightning is associated with cold fronts and thunderstorms. But I've lived in Florida since 1981. We have a different kind of thunderstorm during the summer that we call an air mass thunderstorm. Central Florida is the lightning capital of the United States. Next to Central Florida, some areas in Colorado. The lightning capital of the world is near Kilimanjaro, Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. But still in Florida, what I find is people who move here or people who have grown up here, they almost take lightning for granted. Excuse me. And some of the original instruction about lightning, they would train people to, when you see a lightning strike, count so many seconds till you hear the thunder, and that'll tell you how far away the lightning was. Well, it turns out in life safety form, that is absolutely irrelevant. If you see lightning or you hear thunder, you were not hit. You were lucky. You got a warning to get inside. So one of the things we're going to do today, we're going to talk about the things that are not normally covered in meteorology training for pilots, but might save their life, both in the air and on the ground. First off, why are we talking about it in general? Let's go to that slide. This is a slide about where thunderstorms occur in the United States. We are down there where that number 100 is in the part of Florida, where there are basically 100 days a year minimum that we're going to have thunderstorms in Florida. But notice up in the Seattle area where Mr. Bill Gates lives, we can relate to him. He's lucky if he hears thunder 5 times a year. However, they can get 180 inches of rain a year. It's a completely different kind of weather system. So let's start, though, to talk about lightning. Fortunately, aircraft are designed to dissipate lightning energy, and that's not such an issue. But on the ground, when you're getting ready to go fly or you're on the ground, lightning can be a killer. This is a chart of some of the deaths around the United States. Some of this is tied to the fact of the population, but here is Florida. And once again, since we're in Florida, we're going to talk a lot about Florida, but I want everybody watching this video to know that lightning can occur just about anywhere, and it can kill you just about anywhere. We can see in the middle of the state is Hillsborough County, and I think the number is around 35. It's a small number from me here. And then we see down to the southeast of Lake Okeechobee, we've got Palm Beach County, and we've got Broward County and Dade County. A lot of deaths down there too. So this is worth talking about. Now, there are plenty of pictures online that are much more gross than I'm showing here. I'm trying to get it through your head of the danger, but I'm going to show a video that was produced by the Weather Channel back in the 90s. It's a YouTube video online. You can go see it anywhere. The number one thing that the National Weather Service says today, if you can hear thunder, you are close enough to be struck by lightning. One of the things that beachgoers don't realize in Florida is lightning can go out 20 to 30 miles from the thunderstorm. So if you're standing on the beach and you're looking at a thunderstorm out from Tampa or Daytona Beach or something, you might feel relatively safe, but you're actually in a very dangerous
So last
situation.
night, George, when I saw that thunderstorm move east beyond my house and I could still see the lightning show, I thought about going outside and just seeing the thunderstorm. I would have been in danger potentially of getting struck by lightning, even though the storm had progressed several miles to the east of my house.
Right, unless you're going to be able to get under a power pole that's got a lightning rod on it or something, yes, it's danger time. Back to the slides, please. So this is from that Weather Channel video called Sky on Fire. They sold it as a VHS video, and I had bought it. But like I said, it's a YouTube now, and we're going to only watch a couple minutes of it. But it's going to emphasize for you, the viewer, you, the pilot, you, the ground handler, that there's one of three outcomes if you get hit or are exposed to a lightning bolt. You might get severely burned and injured, and you might recover. You might be killed instantly, or in my opinion, as a former EMT, worse, you might have a lifelong neurological injury almost identical to someone with a massive head injury in a car accident. So let's watch this quick.
Lightning is an indiscriminate killer. By its nature, it is random. People are struck without warning. One single bolt can change people's lives forever.
Shut him down, buddy! You gotta shut him down!
That's what happened to a group of ultimate frisbee players on Sunday, April 10th, 1994. A tournament very much like this one was into its second day in Nashville, Tennessee.
The disc was being counted in, and I forget who was counting it in, but he went, I think it was Stick from the Landing, went 3, 2, and he never said 1, and this bolt of lightning, this huge bolt of lightning came down and struck right in the middle of the people around the disc, and it knocked them all down, it knocked me down, knocked everybody on the field down, and when we got up, or when I looked up, there were 6 or so people lying on the ground.
Sean Adams, who 30 minutes earlier had been sliding through the mud as he waited to play, was killed instantly. Another ultimate frisbee player, Carmen La Palma, lay on the ground motionless.
People running off the field, people running on the field, people were crying. It continued to rain, and at that point we got a lot more lightning. It was just pandemonium for a while. The thing I remember most was I could not help but stare at Carmen because I was thinking, oh my God, she must be dead or something, because smoke was coming off her body.
28-year-old Carmen was rushed by friends to the nearest hospital. Her brain was starved of oxygen for several minutes. Carmen's parents rushed to her bedside.
I felt so overwhelmed, not only seeing my child in that position, in a coma, not able to speak, but there were so many injuries that Carmen sustained. Carmen had obvious head injury. Carmen had second-degree burns on her body, all over her body. The lightning had entered Carmen's head through the left side, and it had seared part of her hair. It looked like someone had just singed it off. That really let me know what a charge she had taken. In addition to the brain injury, though, all of Carmen's internal organs shut down.
That's girl. Good job. Okay.
Her injuries were extensive. Her life and that of those around her has not been the same since.
Just watching the slowness of the progress and what little progress we've had with her, I cry every day.
the hardest part is now. We're tired. We're emotionally tired. We're physically tired. But Carmen's recovery now is so much slower than it was. When she first woke up from the coma, when she first talked, the first time she walked, these are pretty dramatic improvements. And now it's slowed down quite a bit, and we're constantly asked by the doctors to be patient. We know that she will get better. We don't know how much better. No one knows that. So I think just the waiting and the not knowing, that's the hardest.
It has been a very, very long, painful struggle for everyone close to Carmen. She remembers little about that fateful day.
Okay, so we of course feel for that girl and their family, but what I want you to understand is this is not a rare thing. In fact, the Tampa General Hospital in Tampa has one of the biggest lightning recovery groups in the United States, because I don't want to gross anybody out, but so many things can happen. But as a pilot getting ready to fly or coming back from flying, if you're in the vicinity of a thunderstorm, this is a possibility if you don't take into consideration where you are, what you see, and what you hear. So once again, if lightning takes place, get inside. Get in a car, get in a building, get in somewhere, because it's going to hit the highest thing. And while we're on that, the professional golf has been in the news lately because of certain acquisitions of golf organizations. But golfing has been was at one time one of the highest places that lightning hit, because people are conditioned mentally. When it starts to rain, they want to run under a tree. Now, if it's a warm front, if you're up north and it's a warm front coming over the golf course and there's drizzle and then some rain taking place, there isn't going to be any lightning, it's okay. But in a thunderstorm or in anything taking place in Florida, you're running under a lightning rod. It's the last place in the world to go. So we got to get that program in our heads and get rid of the other program that says, well, I don't want to get wet, let's run under a tree. A lot of people that are killed or hit and injured by lightning have happened either because they've stayed out on the field playing during an athletic event, or they've run right under a tree. Okay, now, the next question, Ron, is how in the heck do we know what we know about thunderstorms? Originally, we didn't know much of anything, and we lost pilots. Before World War II, we lost a congressman in a DC-3 crash, and then we lost Newt Rockne, the famous coach of the football team at the University of Notre Dame. And then World War II happened, and we lost a lot of pilots to weather events and thunderstorms in World War II, and especially in training in the United States. But nobody had any idea what was going on in that cloud. After the war, the Navy, the Army Air Corps, and the United States Weather Bureau with the University of Chicago got together and said, we want to do a program where we're going to fly on purpose into a thunderstorm. And I'm going to go to the next slide. This took place 1947 in St. Cloud, Florida, which is right next to Kissimmee, which is probably half-hour drive from Disney World. That's where all the instrumentation was set up and all the radars. These planes flew out of Orlando. So they did that in 1947, and the following year in 1948, they moved it all to an area in Ohio that became Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, because up there they were dealing with cold frontal thunderstorms. Down here we're dealing with what we call air mass frontal storms. This is a map that shows the areas where that research was done. You can see the little box in the middle of Central Florida, and you can, on the right-hand side, you see the one that's in Ohio. This is the plane they selected, the Northrop P-61 Black Widow. It was the first American aircraft specifically designed as a night fighter, and evidently they felt it was the most structurally sound to do what they were about to do. They had no idea what they were actually going to encounter, but what they did know is that most planes that had to fly through a thunderstorm to get away from the enemy or to complete a mission didn't come back out the other side. Back to the slide, please. And these planes had radar now. We had radar. We didn't have radar prior to World War II that was operational. And these planes had volunteers, 2 people in that plane, the pilot and there was a meteorologist. And here you can watch this video on YouTube also. We took these planes, 5 of them at a time, and we flew them in at 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25,000 feet. None of them were lost, but they had instrumentation and they had movie cameras, 60 millimeter movie cameras, didn't have video then, videoing what was happening with the instrumentation in the back cockpit of the airplane. And this picture is what came out of that, most of what came out of that research. And every book written on weather or meteorology, when they talk about thunderstorms, the first thing they're going to do is zoom back to Dr. Byers and the University of Chicago and talk about these air mass thunderstorms are suicidal. The cold downward kills the updraft, and that's why they don't live long enough. One of the key phenomenons in thunderstorms, like hurricanes, is all the conditions have to be just right. We call it the Goldilocks principle. If you remember, Goldilocks went into the house of the 3 little bears. One of the bowls of porridge was too hot, one of the porridge was too cold, but the other bowl of porridge was just right. Meteorological conditions have to be just right to get supercells, to get tornadoes, to get hurricanes. Back to the slide, please. So this is the modern version of what we saw from Dr. Byers and the Thunderstorm Project. By the way, let me back up a minute. This was called the Thunderstorm Project, and a book was published in 1949. You can buy it on eBay, anywhere between $20 and $150. If you buy it for $20, it's probably been sitting in a garage and really smells. But if you don't have a meteorological background, it isn't going to be too meaningful to you. All that information has been transferred into present day in the brand new released FAA manual on weather. But it goes into the fact of, first off, the sun is the source of all energy of weather on Earth, and the sun does not heat the air. The wavelengths, the electromagnetic energy wavelengths that are coming to Earth from sun are at the wrong wavelength to heat the air. They'll heat the water vapor, but for the most part, they go right through the air and they heat the ground. They heat the earth and the water. That energy is re-radiated at the correct wavelength to heat the air. Thus, the atmosphere, the troposphere and the atmosphere are heated from the bottom up, and that causes convection. And that's the beginning of a thunderstorm. If we can go back to the slide, please. That's the beginning of a cumulus cloud, which is stage 1 of developing a thunderstorm. If there's enough water vapor in the atmosphere, we will get a thunderstorm. And I'm going to come back to this. But like I said, what I want to do today is cover some things that aren't normally covered in your standard, teaching about thunderstorms and severe weather and aviation.
So George, if I can see this slide that you're looking at there, on the far left is the beginning of a thunderstorm.
Right, can we go back to the slide?
The sun heating the earth, moisture vapor rising because of it being warmed, and that's the beginning of a thunderstorm. And then they progress through the mature stage in the middle slide, and then the far one is what, the dissipating stage?
Dissipating stage.
So the 3 phases of a thunderstorm we see there from left to right on this screen.
Right, and I if we have the time, I hope to come back to this. Based on segueing off something you just said, a lot of people never think about the fact, what happens to a thunderstorm? What happens to a supercell? By the way, we rarely get a supercell thunderstorm in Florida, which is why we rarely get huge tornadoes. And most people wonder why. Well, in the Midwest, we have cool or cold, dry Canadian air coming down from Canada, and the warm, dry air coming over the Rocky Mountains, mixing with the more moist air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. That's the recipe for severe weather and tornadoes. We're going to go into that in a minute. But down in Florida, we have warm, moist air mixing with warm, moist air, and we're not normally going to get a tornado from that.
Not a supercell in Florida.
Right.
George, I think we got a video that's going to take some time here before we run out of time. Why don't we
good.
go to that?
Okay, what I want to show next, This is a by the way, though, it's called the Great Courses Company. The Great Courses produces college-like courses. They're not for credit, but they have 2 videos on meteorology. This one is called The Science of Extreme Weather, done by Professor Snodgrass, who was formerly at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And what he has put in here is a graphical illustration of our present understanding of what causes a tornado. And I want to go into that because what we got from buyers during the during the thunderstorm project was the fact we had updrafts and we had downdrafts. But still nobody had a clue of what was causing the tornado. Now we're going to see it.
Those large colliding air masses are simply the trigger for the storms. The creation of the tornado is by other processes entirely. So, the science of tornado genesis begins with an understanding of the storm, in particular, an understanding of supercell dynamics. In supercells, wind shear in the lowest mile of the atmosphere is responsible for creating horizontally aligned tubes of air. A strong low-level jet races over the surface winds, creating a helical tube of spinning air. Developing thunderstorms can tilt a tube like this upwards. This spin, which was once horizontally aligned, is now twisting vertically in the updraft. The updraft is now rotating, leading to the birth of the mesocyclone and the supercell. How this process leads to the formation of a tornado has long been a mystery, but continual research by the best meteorologists has discovered the storm scale processes that occur within the supercell to create a tornado. A precursor to the formation of a tornado is the appearance of a wall cloud. The wall cloud forms at the base of the updraft of the supercell. Its name is derived from how this cloud often appears to form a wall around the tornado. The wall cloud appears to lower itself from the base of the updraft as the supercell strengthens. However, this is just an illusion. In reality, the wall cloud builds itself at lower and lower altitudes as the supercell ingests its own juicy air. Let's see how this process unfolds. Here's an outline of a supercell thunderstorm. The mesocyclone forms here and spins its way upward through the depth of the troposphere at the heart of the storm. The reason this updraft appears to be leaning to the right is because of the wind shear. Stronger winds aloft push the updraft downstream. These same winds create the forward flank downdraft. This is the front side of the storm, where the majority of the precipitation falls. Falling precipitation in the forward flank creates a powerful downdraft. As this downdraft air hits the ground, it splashes outward radially. The air in the downdraft is cool and nearly saturated. As it collides with the warm, moist air that is flowing toward the storm, the warm air runs right over the top of the outflow. Strong but small-scale vertical wind shear results from this collision, and the result is a tightly spinning, horizontally aligned tube of air. The tail end of this tube runs just beneath the mesocyclone. Here it is once again pulled upward by the updraft. The wall cloud emerges when this tube of air is ingested into the storm. It appears as a lowering of the cloud base because the storm is actually breathing in its own outflow. The air is very near saturation, and as a result, it needs only be lifted a short distance to cool enough for condensation to begin. The wall cloud spins faster than the mesocyclone too. This is a live look at a wall cloud. Notice how low it is to the ground. The mesocyclone is above this, outside of this shot. The forward flank is off to the right and out of the shot as well. You are getting an up-close view of what it is like to go storm chasing. Watch what happens over the next few moments. Do you notice the cone-shaped cloud feature that has appeared in the center of the wall cloud? That is the funnel cloud. You are witnessing tornado genesis. Where does the tornadic circulation originate within the storm? Well, in the same manner in which the wall cloud formed, the tornado was born out of the thunderstorm's other downdraft, the rear-flanked downdraft. First, let's recall that the mesocyclone, the updraft of the storm, is sandwiched in between the forward flank downdraft and the rear flank downdraft. Now, The rear flank downdraft is much smaller. Descending air on the backside of the storm is pushed against the updraft by the environmental winds on the backside of the storm. This downdraft is often composed of heavy rain and occasionally hail. As this air descends, the rear flank downdraft curls around the mesocyclone, producing the familiar hook shape on radar. Check out this radar image, which shows the hook echo and rear flank of the storm. Just like the forward flank downdraft, this descending air hits the ground and splashes outward radially. From the top down, both outflow boundaries spread and intersect near the updraft. The forward flank has already created the wall cloud. Let's discover how the rear flank creates the tornado. The outflow in the rear flank creates yet another tube of spinning air that is horizontally aligned. Being so close to the updraft, this tube is pulled upward by the strong vertical winds within the wall cloud and mesocyclone. The tube of air bends and bows upward, creating two vertically aligned tubes of air. The one located nearest the updraft rotates counterclockwise, while the other, which is closest to you in this figure, rotates clockwise. Each tube is capable of producing a tornado. However, the clockwise spinning tube often dissipates or is sheared apart, leaving only the counterclockwise spinning tube. This tube of air is then stretched vertically as it is pulled upwards by the mesocyclone. Stretching tightens the rotation, causing it to spin faster by the conservation of angular momentum. The tornado is born as this tube of air is stretched.
So Ron, that's the reason I showed this, was to get across to pilots, whether they're airline pilots or new student pilots, that thunderstorm is a lot more than just updrafts and downdrafts. Depending on the stage of the thunderstorm and whether they're in the Midwest or here, there's vortices in there. There's vortexes that could get that plane going this way or get that plane going this way, things that most pilots would never be able to recover from. Dick Collins, who wrote all kinds of books about flying and weather, had warned about thunderstorms, but he never really went into what's inside of them. So what's inside of there is an updraft that's either going to take you up, a downdraft that's going to smash you on the ground, or these vortexes that you might get absorbed into that you could never get out of.
Wow. And much of this research was done by that thunderstorm project in the late 40s, and then other scientists have added on to it, meteorologists have added on to it as our knowledge has grown, and I guess we're continuing to learn more about thunderstorms. But thanks to those brave pilots who flew those airplanes through the thunderstorms back in the late 40s, it gave us the first understanding of thunderstorms, and now we just built on that. That's great. So I guess when I was a child, I was playing outside and it started raining, and my mom said, "Come in out of the rain." That was really a wise thing that she told me, right? Not only to not keep from getting wet, but to keep from getting hit by a thunderstorm and a lightning bolt.
Right, if it was a thunderstorm.
If it was a thunderstorm.
It was just a warm front with lots of snow or lots of rain, that's not a problem, because we're not going to get that.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, and so there was lots of thunderstorms there and some tornadic activity. So, Dr. Bartuska, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you had a lot more that you could have shared with us, but time limited, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes. So, thank you, audience, for joining us today for Plane Time, both for the first two segments with Mr. Alfonso on the theory of flight 2.0, and now in this last segment with Dr. Bartuska on thunderstorms and lightning. I'm sure we've learned a lot about this. Among other things, don't fly in thunderstorms, of course, and give them a wide berth even when you're flying in and around them. So thank you very much. So I'm Ron Timmermans from Orlando, Florida. This has been Florida Aviation Network broadcasting live and in the clear from Orlando's studios. This is Plane Time, and so please join us again in a couple months. We'll have another Plane Time version in August, I believe it is. And stay tuned for the special number you'll need for Wings Knowledge Credit. Thank you for joining us today.